There's a mistake you can make that won't just ruin your night, it could end your life. These aren't stories about breaking into haunted houses on purpose. These are real people who walked into the wrong house and never came out the same. Some entered thinking it was their Airbnb. Some went in chasing a lost pet. But what they found inside was beyond human understanding, and they survived to tell the tale. Barely. These are the terrifying true stories from people who entered the wrong house. I was 17 when it happened. It was a Friday night, early fall, and the air in our small Oregon town had just started to turn crisp. My best friend Caleb and I had been invited to a birthday party for someone from our school, Rachel, a girl we only vaguely knew but were too bored to turn down an invite from. The directions were clear. House on Whispering Pines Lane, red mailbox, porch light on. Sounds simple, right? Except there were two houses on Whispering Pines Lane that matched that exact description. We pulled up around 8:30 p.m., music thumping from Caleb's car speakers as we looked for the address. A red mailbox, porch light glowing warmly, kids walking down the road with solo cups in hand. All signs said this was the place, except it wasn't. The house was big but dark inside. No loud music, no people hanging out on the porch. Just stillness. Caleb raised an eyebrow, but I laughed it off. Maybe it's just getting started. We walked up the wooden steps, knocked once. No answer. I reached for the knob, half joking, half drunk on excitement. It turned. The door creaked open like it hadn't moved in years. We stepped inside and immediately, the air shifted. Cold. Stale. Like the house hadn't been lived in for decades. I reached for my phone to turn on the flashlight, but it died instantly, even though I'd charged it in the car. Caleb's did the same. That should have been the first red flag. We called out, "Rachel, hello?" Silence. That's when we heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, dragging, heavy. Caleb looked at me and I swear to God his face went pale. He whispered, "Maybe it's part of the party, like a haunted house or something." I wanted to believe that, I really did. Then we heard it. A voice. Soft, childlike, whispering from the hallway. Not from upstairs, from inside the house, on our floor. "Don't go up there." It was like ice had been injected into my spine. Caleb grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the door, but it slammed shut before we got there. I don't mean it just closed, I mean it slammed, like something wanted us inside. I pounded on it, kicked it, nothing. Then, from upstairs, something came crashing down. A heavy mirror or dresser maybe. The floorboards above us groaned and cracked like something heavy was moving. And then, silence. No footsteps. No whispers. Just the sound of my heart pounding in my ears and Caleb whispering, "We need to get out, now." I spotted a side door through the kitchen, bolted toward it, slipped once on something wet. God, I didn't even want to know what it was, and yanked it open. Fresh air, cold, clean, beautiful air. We tumbled out into the backyard and ran until we couldn't breathe. When we looked back, we saw someone standing in the window of the second floor. Not Rachel, not anyone from our school. Just a figure, watching us, perfectly still. We found the real party 2 houses down. Lit up, loud, full of people. Rachel said no one lived in that other house. It had been abandoned since the 1980s after the family inside. Well, no one really knows. The town doesn't talk about it. The records were lost. But the lights still work. And the door is always unlocked. I used to work night shifts at a rural clinic in western Kentucky. It was quiet most nights. A few emergencies here and there, but nothing too wild. One night around 1:15 a.m., I got off early due to a power issue at the clinic. I was exhausted but strangely alert, maybe from the coffee or maybe from the way the wind howled outside like something alive. I lived in a rented house on Sycamore Hollow Road. Every property looked the same. White siding, gravel driveway, porch swing. I wasn't thinking clearly when I pulled into what I thought was my driveway. Same mailbox, same broken fence post, same porch swing creaking in the wind. But this wasn't my house. I didn't know that until I was already inside. I unlocked the front door using my spare key. It worked, surprisingly, and stepped into complete darkness. The lights didn't respond. I figured it was from the power outage, so I used my phone flashlight. That's when I noticed the smell, like something old, damp, like rotting wood and dried blood. The layout was wrong too. My house had the kitchen to the right. This one had stairs instead. I should have turned around. I should have walked out and double-checked the address. But then I heard something upstairs. Rocking, squeaking, rhythmic. I froze at the base of the stairs. My brain was foggy, but that sound was unmistakable. An old wooden rocking chair moving back and forth. And then came the voice, raspy, cracked with age. "Harold, is that you again?" I didn't move. I couldn't even breathe. "You left me here, Harold." My flashlight flickered, and I turned to bolt. But then came footsteps, not from upstairs, from behind me. from the dark kitchen I had just walked past. Someone else was in the house. I ducked behind the couch, holding my breath as my light went out completely. I could hear footsteps now circling the room, slow, deliberate, scraping across the wood floor. Something brushed the back of the couch. I swear I felt fingers trail along it. Then the voice came again, closer this time, directly behind me. "You're not Harold?" I leapt up, dashed for the front door, but it wouldn't budge. I turned just enough to see her, a frail woman in a white nightgown, long white hair, face sagging like melting wax. Her eyes were pure black. She opened her mouth but didn't speak, just screamed, a raw, animal sound that made my ears ring. I didn't use the door. I shattered the living room window with a lamp and dove out, cutting my arms on the glass and rolling onto the porch. I sprinted down the road until I saw my actual house, 2 driveways down. My porch light was off. I had never left it off before, and when I checked the mailbox, it was different. Same street, wrong house. I called the sheriff the next morning. He said no one lived in the house I'd entered. In fact, it was supposed to be condemned. Had been for over a decade after a woman named Clara Monroe went missing inside. Her husband Harold had disappeared the year before that. No electricity, no water, no one had a key. But somehow mine worked. And the porch swing still creaks in the wind, even when there's no wind. Back in 2016, I had just moved to a new city for college and was staying with my cousin Lucas until I found a place of my own. He had recently bought a small 2-story fixer-upper at 47 Birch Lane. Quiet street, mostly retirees and young families. The house had good bones but needed work. He warned me not to go into the locked room upstairs, said it was filled with junk from the previous owners, and the key was long gone. I didn't think much of it at first. Old houses always have secrets, right? But strange things started happening within days. It began with scratching, not in the walls, on the door of that locked room. Every night, just after midnight, I'd hear it, faint at first, then louder, like nails against wood. Sometimes I heard what sounded like faint breathing on the other side of the door. Lucas never acknowledged it. If he heard it, he pretended he didn't. One night, I confronted him. "Hey man, there's something going on with that room." He went quiet, just said, "Ignore it. It goes away eventually." I didn't believe him. That night I stayed up sitting across from the locked room door with a baseball bat in hand. The scratching came again, louder than ever, and then it stopped. Just like that. Dead silence. I was about to get up when the door handle started to rattle, slowly, like someone testing it from the inside. Then came the whisper, so close I felt the breath of it. "Let me out." I ran down the stairs, heart pounding. Lucas was asleep on the couch, oblivious. I shook him awake, panicking. When I told him what I heard, he finally broke. "The guy who owned this place before me, he locked his wife in that room. She went mad, starved to death. He claimed she was possessed, said she kept screaming that something was already in the house with them. I asked if her body was ever found. He said no, she vanished. Police closed the case, called it a runaway, and sold the house at auction. Lucas bought it cheap. For days, I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't sleep, not with the scratching. Then one night, the door was open. I swear to God, neither of us opened it. There was no key. Inside was an empty room, except for a single wooden chair and deep scratches covering the floor and walls. The window had been nailed shut from the outside, and written in dark brown letters across the wall, "He let me in." Lucas moved out a week later. I never stayed in that house again. And the next owner vanished 3 months later. Same room, same door, still locked. In 2018, my friend Mark and I went on a cross-country road trip to celebrate graduating college. Somewhere in Iowa, we took a detour to check out this roadside attraction that turned out to be a bust. We were losing daylight and didn't want to spend another $100 on a motel, so when we saw a for sale sign outside an old farmhouse with no neighbors in sight, we figured we'd crash there just for the night. The door was unlocked. The place had clearly been abandoned for years. Dust thick on every surface, furniture covered with sheets, wallpaper peeling. But strangely, it didn't feel entirely empty. It felt watched. We set up our sleeping bags in the living room and tried to ignore the creaks and moans of the old wood. Around midnight, while we were playing cards by flashlight, we heard a strange crackle from somewhere upstairs. Mark thought it was a raccoon or the wind, but it wasn't. It was a baby monitor. We found it sitting on the hallway floor at the top of the stairs. It was dusty, its antenna bent, but it was on, and worse, it was broadcasting. On the other end, we heard faint humming, like a lullaby, and someone whispering, "Don't cry, Mama's here." We froze. Mark turned it off immediately, and we laughed it off like idiots. Probably left on by the last tenants. No big deal, right? But then, it turned itself back on. This time the voice was louder, angrier. "You weren't supposed to hear that." We bolted down the stairs, grabbed our stuff, and made for the door. It wouldn't open. Every lock in the house, front, back, even the windows, jammed at the same time. That's when we heard thumping from upstairs, heavy and deliberate, like boots stomping slowly toward the staircase. Thud, thud, thud. Mark picked up a chair and smashed the kitchen window. We climbed out and sprinted toward the car. As we pulled away, I looked back. The baby monitor sat on the front porch now, still on, still whispering. We never spoke about that night again, but a few months later, Mark sent me a news article. That farmhouse, it had been the site of a horrific murder in 1987. A woman drowned her infant daughter in the upstairs tub and then hanged herself in the nursery. The house had been abandoned ever since, except someone or something was still inside. This happened to a woman named Grace in the fall of 2014. She had just moved to a small town in Oregon after a messy divorce and was renting a little one-bedroom cottage on the edge of the woods. Cheap, quiet, and supposedly perfect for a fresh start. One rainy night, she came home late from her shift at the diner. It was pouring, sheets of cold rain slamming the windshield as she turned onto the dark, winding road that led to her cottage. Everything looked different in the rain. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, tree branches bent like claws, and she couldn't find her driveway. She must have driven a little too far. But then, there it was. The same white fence, the same porch swing, her house. She pulled into the gravel path, parked, and sprinted through the downpour to the door. It was unlocked, which struck her as odd. Grace was meticulous about locking up, but she figured she must have forgotten. The inside looked identical to hers. Same checkered wallpaper, same chipped coffee table, same cracked porcelain lamp in the corner. But something was off. The air was cold. Too cold. She reached for the light switch. It didn't work. None of them did. She moved through the house with her phone flashlight, calling out in case someone had broken in. Silence. Her bedroom door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open. Her bed was made. She never made her bed. Then she saw it. On the nightstand. Her journal. She walked over and opened it, flipping through the pages. Every word was hers, until the last page. That page read, "I told you not to come back here. I told you to leave it alone. You don't belong in this house anymore." Grace's breath caught. She slowly turned toward the mirror above the dresser and gasped. There was someone in the reflection, not her. A woman, drenched, long black hair plastered to her face, eyes sunken like two empty wells, stood behind her, just staring, silent. But when Grace spun around, no one was there. She didn't scream, she didn't run, she just backed out of the room, heart pounding so loud it hurt, and left everything behind. Out the door, into the rain, into the night. She jumped in her car and drove like hell. 5 minutes later, she saw it. Her actual house. Still untouched, still locked, the lights inside glowing warmly. So whose house had she just entered? When she asked her landlord the next day, he looked pale. There was no other cottage on that road, only an old hunting cabin that had burned down years ago. Burned down, with a woman still inside. This story comes from a man named Marcus who in 2021 was doing food deliveries for a popular app in the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia. It was his last order of the night, midnight, and the app directed him to a clean, well-lit suburban neighborhood. Big homes, manicured lawns, the kind of place where nothing bad ever should happen. He arrived at the destination, a white two-story house with porch lights on and a car idling in the driveway. A man in a hoodie was standing by the front door, texting on his phone. Marcus assumed it was the customer. As Marcus walked up, the man gave him a nod and opened the door. He didn't say anything, just waved Marcus inside. That wasn't totally unusual. Sometimes customers didn't want to talk. But the moment Marcus stepped over the threshold, the entire vibe changed. The air inside was thick and musty, and every light was either dim or flickering. The walls were dirty, peeling. The furniture was old and mismatched. Not at all what you'd expect from a house in this zip code. Marcus looked at the man, who was still silent and still texting. Then, 2 more men appeared from the hallway, both staring at him. One had a camera in hand. The third man locked the front door. That's when Marcus realized he wasn't in the house from the app. "I think I have the wrong address," he said, backing up slowly. "This wasn't on the GPS." The men didn't answer. One of them smirked. The one with the camera raised it and started recording. Marcus didn't wait to figure out what was about to happen. He turned, threw his full weight into the door, and busted it open. Sprinting down the driveway, he leapt into his car and floored it down the street. His heart didn't stop pounding until he was back on the highway with headlights all around him. Back at home, he checked the app. The real address was 1 block over, house number 1384. He had gone to 1438. He called the police, but when they checked the location, the house was empty, boarded up, abandoned, no cars, no lights. And worst of all, no record of any property under that number being occupied for the last 6 years.